There's a moment most pastors don't talk about, and it's not a scandal or burnout. It's not some dramatic crash. It's actually quieter than that. It's the slow realization that the vision you once carried with conviction just isn't there the same way anymore. You still love the people and you believe in the mission, but something's shifted. And when that happens, what do you do? Today's conversation is with Doug Bullock, who pastored and served for 35 years and sensed that there was a shift, that his time was done. He lost his vision for what he was doing, and what he discovered after stepping down surprised him. There was grief, identity loss, that strange feeling of sitting in a church as just another person after decades of leading from the front. So if you're anywhere near that season, or if you're leading a church that will face it soon, then this one matters. Retirement is not the end of the calling, but it is a transition that demands deeper work than many of us are prepared for. Listen up. This is the Life After Ministry podcast, and my guest is Doug Bullock. Hey, Doug Bullock, welcome, and thanks for joining us on the Life After Ministry podcast.
Great. It's great to be here, Matt. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So you're a new relationship, and I got to meet you at a recent conference called the Common Table Collective.
Yep.
And we were out at a really cool, fancy building out there in Houston, Texas, I think. And you heard what we were up to in the transition ministry world, and you said,
Yep.
I have a book for you. And and so I'm just going to spoil the ending right here at the beginning and say that you wrote a book called New Dawn, and it says Helping Pastors Flourish in Retirement. And so we're very aligned. We're rowing in the same direction. And I want to hear your story because you happen to be a retired pastor. And here's my first question is, how did you know that it was time for you to retire? Because I meet some guys that they will say, I'm dying in the pulpit. That was not God's plan, or maybe even your wife's plan in your life.
Yeah. Well, in my case, we were in Syracuse, New York, and been there for 35 years. And at some point, towards the end of this time, I just lost vision for further ministry in the church in terms of my leadership of that congregation. I love the people and love the church and love what we were doing. But I just realized I didn't have the vision to carry on. And I think that was kind of a gift from God in the sense that it was really time for me to leave. And furthermore, my wife was a woman from California, came to New York, dutifully spent 35 years in New York City, or New York State. And at some point towards the end of our time, she looked at me and she said, our children are not coming back to Syracuse, which is where we were, which was her nice way of saying, hey, I think we need to go. And so when my personal life aligned with my professional life or my ministry life, I just knew it was time to leave. And so we set the wheels in motion, took a couple of years to try to leave well. It was really the convergence of my loss of vision and this new vision that my wife and I were creating for being with our 4 daughters.
When you started to figure out the loss of vision, there is a transition coming, did you try to fight it? Was there some reluctance in doing that, or were you desperate to move on and do the next thing?
I wasn't desperate to move on and do the next thing. It was just clear to me that I didn't have the kind of vision that was required to lead the church into the next phase. To be perfectly candid, we had tried some things that didn't really work out the way I had hoped that they would. And as we were trying these things as a church, and as I was trying to lead with a slightly different vision, it occurred to me, if this doesn't work, I think that I'm not the right person to go to the next place. And honestly, it didn't work. And so it just became clear to me, I'm not the right person to go to the next place. Great church, but I've been there long enough and my time has just kind of expired. So no, I was ready to go for those reasons.
And so you came out just before COVID, which may have been a blessing in disguise.
Oh
and
my
you went
goodness.
straight from
Yeah.
and you went straight from there, and you went to go get a PhD. You went back to school after 35 years in the pastorate.
Yeah.
What
Yeah.
what crazy thing propelled you toward that direction?
Well, so I came down here to Charleston, South Carolina, and I set up a ministry, a nonprofit while I was in New York to minister to pastors. It's called The Pastor's Partner, was my little nonprofit. And what I envisioned was traveling to Charleston, South Carolina, having coffee with pastors, preaching on 4th of July for them when nobody wanted to come to church, and just kind of serving
Right.
pastors. And the first weekend I got down there, I called my son-in-law, who runs Young Life in the area, to ask him, who should I meet with? And he turned me on to the guy who directs the Southern Baptist. And I called him, and he said, why don't you come to this seminar we're having? And I went to a seminar with a group of older Southern Baptist pastors run by a 74-year-old gentleman who was trying to talk to them and to me about retiring pastors serving pastors. And this guy became kind of a mentor to me. His name was Kurt Bradford. He worked for Lifeway for a while, planted a successful church, or had a successful church in Charleston here. And he was getting his DMin. And I just realized, you know what? I just need to retool myself. I need to go back to school because I want to keep learning and keep growing. And I've got the time to do that now.
So the plan changed a little bit from the initial, stage setting that you thought you were going to be doing. You've now find yourself you're in seminary and you're starting to learn things. And as you're learning, you start sharing them and you realize like, okay, there's more to this than I originally thought.
Yeah. Well, what happened was, I went to seminary and, at the same time I was trying to talk to some of my fellow retired pastors. And I was trying to talk to them about, hey, why don't you, try to mentor some younger pastors? And one of them looked at me and said, Doug, do you want me to do what you want me to do, or do you want me to do what God wants me to do? And I realized, every guy needs to go. When you retire, you need to go on a journey to figure out what your next phase is about. And so then as I was in seminary, I started thinking, okay, what is this next phase about? And what are the questions that a retiring guy, and by a retiring guy, I mean when you step down from 25 or 30 years of primary leadership and you go to the next phase, what are the questions that you need to be thinking about? What are the sort of biblical, theological questions you need to be thinking about? And as I explored that, I realized there's nothing out there on that. In other words, I looked around and there's no ministry, there's no organization. I mean, I didn't know about you guys then, but there's no ministry, no organization, no book that really helps a lady who's stepping down from 25 or 30 years of primary leadership, who's trying to figure out what's next. There's nobody really helping them think through those major sort of biblical theological questions. I tried to read all the books that I could find on this transition, read all the journal articles, read just about everything I could. But I thought there needs to be a book where a pastor can sit down and read it and think through the biblical theological issues that they need to think about as they move into this next phase.
At what point you can do some preparation, and I think that's the goal and hope of the book, is that you are trying to pave the path toward retirement, but it seems like there are certain things that you can only learn on the other side. How true is that?
Oh my goodness, yeah. Well, for me it was real true. I would have said I had a good plan, but you didn't know what you didn't know, and I did not know the feelings of loss I would experience. Had no idea. I did not know that I would wake up in the middle of the night and think about either the way I failed somebody or the way other people failed me. I didn't know that going to church would be a struggle. I didn't have any idea that I'd sit there in meetings at church and get mad over something. I mean, I just was totally unprepared for the emotional sort of relational struggles that I would face. Nobody told me about that.
And I'm assuming, I mean, what I know of you so far is that you're pretty even-keeled, normal human. Were you surprising yourself with even some of the stuff that, like, what's going on with me? I remember the Jerry Seinfeld episode where he cries for the
Yeah.
first time, and he
Yeah.
touches his eye and tastes it and says, "What is this salty discharge that's coming from my eye?" Like all of a sudden, like everything's falling apart. But did that surprise you?
Oh, totally. Yeah. No, it totally did. I can remember uh, we go to a big church down here in Charleston, and I can remember sitting there one evening, and they're honoring the volunteers, and I'm sitting way out there in the audience in obscurity. At first, mad, and then sad, because maybe I would have been up on the stage, and now I'm sitting in obscurity, and just that the just that. It's almost as if it hit me like a ton of bricks, and I had no idea that was coming, no idea to expect that. I think at times I've described it as just feeling like I was unknown. So you go from a place where I had been in one church for 35 years. It was a community I'd grown up in, and I was very well known, liked or not, at least I was known. And then you go to a place where you feel totally unknown. And that was just a new experience for me. Now, maybe everybody else is more mature than I am, but I did not even imagine that I would feel anything. I thought I would enjoy being unknown, but not so much after a while.
Yeah. I'm talking to a few guys who are on the brink. They're on the cusp. They're thinking about it at various stages, right? They're anywhere from like a year to 5 years out. And I have the sense already that for some of them, this is a difficult process. Even beforehand, as they start, it's almost like, when you get cancer, they say there's a grief, but there's anticipatory grief. Were you feeling some of that? And then what do you do with those feelings before the actual retirement day comes? How do you process that? And if you could go back and do that better or set yourself up for success better, what would you start to do?
Yeah, no, this is a shameless plug. Yeah, this is a shameless plug. But apart from either talking to a retiring pastor or picking up like a book like New Dawn, and there's really no other book like it that I'm aware of, and kind of reading what pastors have experienced and what it's like and the issues you need to think through, I don't know how you prepare for it, I mean, I think your walk with God and all of that, you're prepared for whatever may come. I mean, I get all that. But in terms of what you might experience when you retire and how to prepare for that, I don't know how other than reading about what people have said who've been there.
Yeah, it's like premarital a little bit, right? Like I used to tell people all the couples I used to go through and lead them on premarital. I said, like, all of the chapters in the premarital books are all of the same chapters in the marriage books. It's just some of it you're going to have figured out beforehand, and some of it you're going to have to do on the fly.
No, it's and it's anticipate God working, and God doesn't desert you. And I am so glad that I went through some of the things that were really difficult. I can remember sitting in a restaurant with my wife and ordering a turkey sandwich and just having this overwhelming sense. This is about a year after I retired, having this overwhelming sense of like purposelessness. What is my purpose? And I'm so glad I went through those things because they helped me to write about it and think about it and experience it and maybe help somebody else.
So you walk through 10 questions. And these questions are the ones that you're asking pastors to think through. Give me a sense of a couple that stand out and highlight, maybe even the one that caught you by surprise the most.
Issues like, how do I deal with my loss? When you retire, there's a certain amount of things that you lose, and how do I deal with that? The issue of pain. How do I redeem the pain of ministry? A lot of times, guys who retire deal with pain of mistakes they've made, pain of things they put up with. Sometimes there's a lot of pain at the end. Some guys have a real inglorious ending, and there's a lot of pain. And so you got to get through that pain to see if God can redeem that pain. What do I do with my role in the local church? That can be a tough one. A lot of guys don't really want to go to church anymore. What do I do with my life calling? My life purpose is built on my calling. What do I do with my calling? If I'm no longer a pastor, what am I? What do I do with that?
Right.
How do I be a steward of my experience? Because when you're a pastor, you have all kinds of experiences, and now you're called to steward those experiences. And that's not an easy thing to figure out. How can I mentor younger pastors? Another one. How am I going to continue to grow? Because oftentimes our growth tools or mechanisms are tied in with our ministry. And the things we do in ministry promote growth in our lives. What happens when I don't do this anymore? Those are a number of the questions that I ask. One of the things, if I were to say what surprised me or what kind of opened my eye, was this whole issue of the local church and how hard it is, difficult it is oftentimes for retiring pastors to attend local church. And what I discovered and came to believe, Matt, is there's, in many, many churches, there's no real role, no real way of thinking about what do we do with a retired guy who doesn't want to carry the whole burden, but still wants to be involved in ministry and wants to have significance and live out their calling. Well, we don't really have a place for that. And in many cases, what that leads to is just a lack of what I describe as a lack of honor. And I think very often that lack of honor, and it can be mutual. It can be mutual, or the guy who's retired dishonors those who are leading, and those who are currently leading dishonor the guys who retire. And I think that's too bad, because I think the retired guy is sort of like having a grandfather around. And boy, you want a good grandfather around. So anyway, those are some of the issues that we've talked about.
Yes, it's beyond just sitting in the pews, unknown, or even just like the guy up front behind the pulpit is just, he's blowing it. He's missing the main point of the whole passage, right? That those types of outrages can be there, but it's really just I'm here. I used to be known, and now I'm totally unknown. How do we fix this piece of, if you could wave the magic wand and say, well, let's find a way to put into practice, to leverage 35 years of experience to be able to.
You know what I would do? I think we have what has come to be the standard practice, and the standard practice in many denominations, and even in many sort of evangelical non-denominational churches, the standard practice or standard of care is the guy who retires leaves town, or if they stay in town, they don't come back to this church. And that's kind of the standard that we all kind of say, well, that's the way it should be. And what I would do, if I could wave a magic wand, it would be to say, hey, let's say that the actual standard is, what if guys who retired stayed involved, if they wanted to, stayed connected to their local church and had a great relationship with the incoming pastor and supported them? What would that be like? What would it be like if we had conferences and seminars on how to do that? Now, that seems like something I could get excited about. What would it be like if that was our goal, if that was our mission, if that's what we talked about? What if we saw the energy that would be come to a church if the older people stayed and bought into the vision of the younger pastor, and that was motivated by and driven by the example of the older pastor who also was on that team, and they were honoring each other, and there was mutual humility? What would it be like if we as a church explored that alternative? Because that way we wouldn't have these drastic changes that take place when a new pastor comes.
So I'm going to agitate that a little bit, because and I'm not even sure I have the right answer. It might be both and, but where are we getting stuck on that? Do you think it's more of the younger generation wanting to dismiss and get rid of the older generation? Or do you think there is the older generation looking at the younger ones saying they don't get it, they're never going to get it, and I have nothing to contribute here?
That's a great question. I think the biggest problem is we don't have a vision for it. In other words, in the church culture, we don't have a vision for that reality taking place. I think we have dismissed that because perhaps younger pastors and older pastors have behaved badly, and so we don't have a vision for an alternative. Yeah. And so I think that it's not even really thought about or pursued a lot. It's not even something that we work towards. It's not even something that we envision in many cases as a possible really good outcome. We just don't see the benefits of, hey, what would it be like if? And because we've perhaps been overwhelmed by the problems that occur, and indeed there are problems, because it takes humility and honor, and those things are sometimes in short supply.
You're what, 5-6 years out now from stepping away. Do you still call yourself pastor? Do people call you pastor? At what point does that title start to wear off, or has it not yet?
Yeah, no, it's kind of an unfair question because I never actually did call myself pastor. And so the people always called me Doug. They never called me pastor. And I came into a different culture down here where they address people as pastor. So I've had to kind of get used to referring to the pastors as, hey, Pastor so-and-so.
Uh-huh.
Um, but I don't call myself a pastor. I say I was a pastor. And I think letting go of that identity, not because it was bad, but because it was temporary, is really a helpful thing for me. I do think that it's true. I still pastor people, but I'm not a pastor.
Yeah. Vanderblumen, he talks about the double-humped camel, that we have just as many pastors who are 40 and younger as we do who are 65 and older.
Oh yeah, it's horrible.
I'm in the downward valley, right in there, in between all of that. But what opportunity is that presenting for the church today?
Oh man, I think I think we need the church needs to stop and take a look at that and say, hey, this is a desperate situation. We got to do something about this. And I say to retired pastors, man, you have a role to play. You have an important role in this kingdom to play, and that is to reach back and encourage some younger pastor. Most pastors, the stats, Matt, 42% of the pastors would say, I think that's what it is, that they're lonely. They don't have a good friend. What if every retired pastor just said, hey, I'm going to look for 10 pastors and just pray for them and call them every once in a while and just try to be on their team, take them out for coffee, not to add to their schedule, but just to try to encourage them and do something that nobody else does for them.
Yeah.
And I think there's a tremendous opportunity. The largest seminary, think about this, the largest seminary in the country now is at Liberty University, and most of those are online. So how many of those online pastors how many of those men, mostly men or women, have someone in their life that's caring for them? It certainly isn't the professor, right? They're studying online. So who is in their world? So I just think it's a tremendous opportunity. And if older retired pastors who have 25, 30, 35 years of experience could look backwards and say, you know what, I want to help the younger guy who doesn't have somebody in their world. I want to be there for him. I want to encourage him. Man, what a difference.
Did you find in any of your research and study how many pastors are retiring? Is that like an annual number? Do you know what that is?
Well, you figure, Matt, there's 300,000 or so churches in the country, and I think they've determined 17% of those pastors are over 65. And so if you do the math and you make some assumptions about how many of those who are over 65 retire every year, you get to several thousand retiring every year. And, I've heard numbers that are like that. I had a conversation with the leaders of one denomination, a Lutheran denomination, and they said, okay, we're going to have 600 pastors retire this year, 600 pastors retire the next year, and then the next year. And so they had 3 or 4 consecutive years with 600 pastors retiring. And this is the kicker. They didn't have 600 people in their pipeline. So they were going to lose 600 every year. And that was more than their whole pipeline they had in terms of pastors.
Houston, we have a problem.
Houston, we have a problem. Yep.
So, on the other side of everything that you have going, what I find interesting is that the byline of the book is helping pastors flourish in retirement. You've defined retirement, but what does flourishing look like, and are you there yet?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I think flourishing is really following hard after Christ and experiencing all that he wants you to experience and being all that he wants you to be during that time. And, for some guys, flourishing is taking care of your wife who's sick and focusing in on that because that's what you have to do. And that's what God's called you to do. That's your calling right now. For some people, flourishing is working hard at Home Depot because you don't have the funds and being a witness at Home Depot. A friend of mine has retired and he's been teaching school for the last 5 years to up his income and take care of that. But he's walking with God. He's studying, he's reading the scriptures, he's growing spiritually, he's thriving, he's dealing with things that he needs to deal with. He's witnessing at school. He's not pastoring, but he's flourishing. And that's, I just want people to walk with God and to experience continued spiritual growth and just be doing what God has called them to do at that moment. Yeah. And not giving up, not sitting in despair, not being bitter or angry, not pulling away from the local church and the community of God, not being, living out their calling in some way, shape, or form.
So let's say that I'm able to bring another party into this call right now, and it's a guy who has just come to the same conclusion that you did just before COVID, that I think this is it. I think I'm done. I'm tired. I feel maybe burned out and spent a little bit. What's the thing that you would tell him over the next set of months and couple years for him to be able to move through those years well?
I mean, I think in light of the book New Dawn, what I would say is, hey, grab a book like this, grab New Dawn, and just go through the questions and think about this. Because it may be that you need to take some time and really deal with the pain and the exhaustion. And I think that time is always a good thing, but you've got to deal with these things. You've got to let go of the pain. You've got to ask God to redeem the failures you had or the mistakes you made or the things that were said about you. You've got to let go of those things and ask God to redeem those things. So yes, it takes time, but the time has to be, I believe, invested in making things better and not holding on to things, not just grabbing a hold of the difficulties, but by working through them. And that takes time, for sure.
Yeah. It's interesting because I didn't retire. I came out the hard way, but I found myself resonating with a lot of the things that I was reading in the book. I didn't have to retire, but the whole identity piece and going back to church piece and all of these different struggles and trying to make sense of. But one of the companions for me along the way too was Viktor Frankl, Man's Search for Meaning. Yeah. And he would say that, and he was a contemporary of Freud, and Freud was all about man's ultimate aim is a life of pleasure. And here comes Frankl, and he says, well, after pleasure has run its course, man ultimately will be searching for meaning. And he finds meaning in three different ways. One is that you get to share your life significantly with people around you who you love, and they love you also helps. That you are contributing something of value and importance in the world. And you've brought this up a couple of times, is to make sense of one's suffering. To be able to take stock and say, that did not go how I wanted it to, whether it was your exit or a season in ministry. But do you feel like on the other side of things that you have made peace with some of those voices and some of those seasons? And how did you get to the other side of that?
Yeah, no, that's great. And well, honestly, it's a process. And part of it was by dealing with it and experiencing it. I think we tend to run away from pain, and we tend to run away from both loss and pain, which is sort of a different kind of loss is a different kind of pain, but we tend to run away from those things. And because I was writing the book, and I really tried to dive into those experiences and feel them deeply, and then figure out, what do I do with all this? And honestly, at some point, I just felt God saying, okay, we need to move past this. We need to let this stuff go. Part of being a new creature in Christ and part of walking with God is at some point letting go of the regret and deciding, you know what, this stuff is no longer going to haunt me. And part of the thing that helps do that is as you dive back in to ministry in some way, shape, or form, you see God use the things that you experienced and the pain that you had. I just had a conversation just yesterday with a pastor who's had tremendous growth and had some great things going on, but he's kind of stuck and really feeling a sense of failure. And I shared with him my own sense of failure and what was driving it, and how my sense of failure had been driven by my own personal desire for success that was so deeply embedded within me. I didn't even know it was there. And how God awakened me to that. And when I was able to share my experience of failure in ministry and how God awakened me to my own sense and need for success, he goes, "Oh yeah, I got that." So I was able to take what I experienced and help him with what he's experiencing. And at that point, you go, "Okay, God, all right, thank you for teaching me that, because now I can maybe help another person." And boy, that's so crazy good when that happens.
Well, my hope is that you'll be able to help a lot of people, because if pastors are retiring by the thousands every single year, and they are, my hope is that your book is going to be a trusted guide and companion for them along the way. Where can somebody get this, and how do they find you and connect you and all of the things?
Yeah, that's a great question. This book is available on Amazon. I priced it to sell. You can get a pretty good deal on the Kindle there. And I just wanted to make it available. Honestly, if someone called me and they wanted to get bulk copies, I'll give them a real good deal. People, you don't make money on books, and I'm not trying to make any money on this book.
This is not the retirement plan?
This is not the retirement plan, no.
Yeah.
I just feel God's call to try to help pastors who are struggling with this. The quickest way, I don't know, Matt, do you find yourself confusing because you have like 5 different emails?
Yeah, you just pick one.
Yeah, just pick one. I'll give you one. DTS844. DTS is in David, Tom, Sally, DTS844@gmail. That's a great way to get a hold of me. And, email me and I'll text you, and we'll get a number and get a phone call on. And if I can be of help to some pastors, I'd love to do that. Right now, I didn't tell this. Right now, I actually work at a retreat for pastors. And so we host 15 pastors for 4 days, do that twice a week. And we'll see 1,000 pastors this year at our retreat. And it's great. And so I love talking to pastors.
Yeah. What's that retreat called, and how do people
It's
find
called
that?
the Retreat at Church Creek. It's a part of a ministry called the Pastors Collective, started by Greg Surratt at Seacoast Church here in Charleston. And the Retreat at Church Creek, you can look that up, or just look up the Pastors Collective. We actually make this retreat. It's we work hard to try to provide a free retreat for pastors of smaller churches, because we just believe in the little guy who's working hard and nobody's telling him that what he's doing is important, and we just believe it is.
Yeah, that's great. Well, here's what I'm going to do. I got to get some books from you, and I'm going to let people know that the first 5 people that email me, Matt@ministrytransitions.com, and say, "I want that book by Doug," I'll send that over. So the first 5 are on me, and the rest of them you got to get from Doug on Amazon. So, Doug, I appreciate you sharing your story. It's been a pleasure meeting you. We have a lot in common, and it's all for the kingdom. So thanks for your work and for sharing your story today.
My pleasure, Matt. Thank you so much.
So if you've ever thought, I didn't expect this to feel so heavy, I want you to hear this. You're not alone. Stepping away from ministry leadership can surface things you didn't know were there. It could be regret or anger, loss, and even the painful and quiet fear of just becoming irrelevant. And ignoring it, by the way, doesn't make it go away. And so here's some good news. Your season can still flourish, not because you manufacture and create purpose, but because calling doesn't expire. It just changes what it looks like. It changes shape. If you are approaching a transition or guiding one, don't wait until the final Sunday to start thinking about it. Visit ministrytransitions.com, book a confidential call, or support leaders who are walking through that painful change right now. And be sure to check all of the show notes for Doug's book and retreat center that he mentioned. You know, his book is incredible. As I'm making my way through it, I can imagine that for those of you who are going into the season, or if you're on a board and you're going to have somebody go through this season, by the way, you don't have to be a pastor. You could be leading a nonprofit. You could own a business and are facing your own retirement, and you figure out, well, what am I going to do now? I encourage you, grab New Dawn, helping pastors flourish in retirement. And I think that you will be blessed along the way. So thank you for listening. This is the Life After Ministry podcast.